So, all the respected office bearers of Akhil Bharatiya Adhivakta Parishad Mumbai branch, and I would like to specially thank Advocate Ram Apte and Advocate Pravartak Pathak for having invited me. And it's a great pleasure to make a case before the advocates. So, I have this important task of putting up my case, and the topic which I have been given is about the monetary policy of the Reserve Bank of India in the context of the COVID pandemic that all of us are facing. So what I intend to do is over about next about 25-30 minutes, I would like to give you an overview about what the RBI is trying to do. And then, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your questions. And I would keep track of your questions once I submit whatever overview I wanted to give you. And then I will take up the questions to the extent of best of my ability. Before I begin, I would like to offer my respectful pranams to Shraddheya Dattopant Thingdi ji. Of course, this entire series of talks is named after him, and my respectful pranams to him. What I've also been told to do is briefly introduce myself, so I would do that. Of course, we always say that one should not talk about oneself too much, but since I've been asked to do so, I need to do it. So basically, my name is Abhijit, Abhijit. Family name is Padnis. And just to give you a quick overview about my academic background, I completed my BCom in 1982. Some of you may be knowing Advocate Vinay Navre, who practices in Delhi Supreme Court. So Vinay and I have been batchmates in M.L. Dhanukar College of Commerce. Of course, participated in student politics together as well. So I stood first in M.L. Dhanukar College in my BCom exam, and after that, I pursued various professional programs in the accounting and finance domain. So I completed my cost and management accountancy exam in 1983 and stood second all India. Then I completed in 1984 the CA program, and I stood 11th all India. When I completed both these programs, I was 21. Then along with my corporate career, I pursued the company secretary program, which is quite overlapping with the legal background that all of you have. And in the intermediate company secretary exam of 1985, I stood first all India. And again in 1987, in the final company secretary exam also, I stood first all India. Parallelly, I had begun pursuing a course which was recently launched then, which was Chartered Financial Analyst program, and I passed the CFA program in the very first batch in 1989, and I stood third all India in that. And then later on, I was selected for the US CFA program under a special arrangement. I passed. I was the only candidate in 91 to pass level 2 of US CFA from India. I've been working for various companies. I began my career with Johnson & Johnson, then worked for an NBFC, then worked for a bank called as Grindlays Bank. And then I had started on my own in 1992. So I was on my own for about 5 years doing various kinds of consulting assignments. And when the Harshad Mehta scam had broken out, Grindlays had called me and again got me involved in some of the confidential work that had to be done. Then one of these Swiss banks, the number 3 Swiss bank called as Swiss Bank Corporation, then had appointed me as a consultant to set up one of their equity broking businesses in India, which I did as a consultant. And then soon thereafter, they offered me whether I could join them full time. And that was the time when the 2 large Swiss banks merged globally, Swiss Bank Corporation and Union Bank of Switzerland, to form the largest Swiss bank today called as UBS. So I was appointed as the Chief Operating Officer for UBS in India. This was in 1998, I'm sorry. And my responsibility covered all the business support functions. So I was responsible for accounting, finance, HR, legal, compliance, operations, building services, Y2K. Y2K, I'm sure you must remember in those days was a very important issue. So I was responsible for all those functions, and then later on, another Swiss bank called as Credit Suisse offered me a role because they wanted to set up some new operations, but that plan was called off. And then I decided to go back to what I love doing, which I started doing in 1985, which was teaching. So I said, why not teach and learn? That's how I took up a teaching engagement as a visiting faculty in the School of Management of IIT Bombay. And I also had an objective of pursuing a PhD from there. So I pursued my PhD over a 6-year period between 2003 to 2009 and completed my PhD in late 2009. For a living, I started offering, wherever I was invited, I started offering corporate workshops and consulting engagements wherever I was invited. One of the things, of course, I have followed is strictly by invitation. I have not otherwise done any kind of marketing or reach out to any company for any of these assignments. But over this period, I have delivered corporate workshops for more than 70 companies, did consulting assignments. I also helped IIT Bombay, my alma mater, in setting up 2 new initiatives. This happened during 2014 to 2016. And of course, I've also been invited for coaching some senior executives in business domains and finance domain. But I also am a YouTuber, so I keep on creating a lot of YouTube videos which will be of use to people. I write poetry. My poems are also available in my Marathi channel. So I have 2 channels and I keep on sharing whatever little I know. So today the topic which has been given to me is about the monetary policy of RBI in the context of the COVID pandemic. Now, you must have also read this, that there are 2 tools available with policymakers whenever such pandemic or any recessionary or particularly depression kind of scenario arises. As you must have heard also that people are saying that this COVID pandemic worldwide is only comparable to 2 things in history. One was the Great Depression, which happened in the 1930s, and also another pandemic which had happened, which was called as Spanish flu about 100 years ago. So we've not seen anything of this severity definitely after the post-World War for a long time. And at this time, 2 policy tools are used by the government, either directly by itself or through the central banks of the country. So one of the policy choices is called as fiscal policy. And you must have also read this, that the Indian government announced a program whereby 1,70,000 crore are going to be spent in helping particularly the people at the bottom of the pyramid, apology, in terms of ensuring that their livelihood, when it is already impacted, their life is not so badly impacted. So a lot of plans have been announced by the government whereby there are waivers in terms of costs for the LPG, and also in the context of giving them certain direct benefit transfers. So all that has been done by the central government, and that is called as the fiscal policy, where the government expands its spending program. But in a country like us, expanding it too much also has its own costs, because what happens is when the country starts spending much beyond its own means, particularly what are the means of the central government? The means of the central government are the taxes that are levied on us. But as we can all visualize that when the economic activity itself comes to a standstill, the tax collection also comes down. And at the same time, trying to spend too much beyond its own earnings increases the fiscal deficit, and it has its own consequences, the details of which I will not go into right now. But when fiscal deficit widens, the government's own borrowings also start going up. And when the government borrowings go up, the ability of the private sector to borrow gets impacted. This is one of the impacts. There are other impacts too, but I'll not go into those details. So because fiscal policy has its own limitations, the other tool which is actively used is the monetary policy. So what is monetary policy? Some of you may have read about this, that during the Great Depression of the 1930s, Keynes, a leading economist, prompted the governments to spend money in the form of the fiscal policy about which I have spoken about, but there is another tool which is available, and that is the monetary policy, using which what is done is money is made available abundantly in the economy. So, what are the objectives of Reserve Bank of India's monetary policy typically? Typically, there are four important objectives. One objective is ensuring that there is enough liquidity. Second is there is enough or adequate financial stability in the economy. Third is the growth aspect. Fourth is the inflation. And if I were to add one more, that is about the sufficiency of our foreign currency reserves. Now, what I would like to very quickly talk about is on some of these dimensions, we are well taken care of. For example, our foreign currency reserves are in excess of 475 billion American dollars. So we are extremely well placed from a foreign currency reserves perspective. So we don't have to worry, RBI doesn't have to worry about foreign currency reserves. But one of the other aspects that it has to worry about is the exchange rate. And we have all seen this, we have known this, that the Indian rupee has fallen from about 70 rupees to a dollar to a little more than 76, and now it has recovered a bit. Now, one of the functions of RBI is also to ensure that Indian rupee in the global context also remains reasonably priced. So if rupee falls dramatically, the Reserve Bank of India can use its foreign exchange reserves to stabilize the rupee. So that aspect is also reasonably taken care of. When a recessionary trend sets in, the inflation worries also come down. If any of you have been tracking the global commodity markets, the oil price has collapsed. In the context of India, if oil price is between $55 to $60, it's a very reasonable price that we can afford. Luckily for us, the price has collapsed to early 20s. It is $21 to $22. Now, when the price collapses by $1 in the international market, India saves $1.2 billion or about 9,000 crores. Now, we can easily do the arithmetic that when oil has fallen from $55 to $21, which is by $34 than what we can afford, we can simply multiply and find out what is the staggering amount of saving that our country is going to do. And the other result of that is that the inflation in India is also not going to be very high. So this is not the situation only with oil, but many other commodities in the global markets have fallen. Now, as an importer of many of these commodities, it's a great saving opportunity for us as a country. And therefore, RBI is generally not so much worried about inflation, also because that the recent recent Rabi crop has been a bumper crop, and the upcoming monsoon is also predicted to be about 100% of the long-term average. In other words, we are going to get a very good rainfall in 2020 also, which would mean that the Kharif crops of 2020 are also likely to be in a good condition. If that is the case, then our worry about inflation comes down for another reason. And therefore, RBI is comfortably positioning that the inflation, though it slightly went up during April 2020 because of various issues including supply constraints, over a period, inflation will inch down towards about 4%, which is very reasonable, and that is the target that RBI has. So which are the areas which RBI is very currently concerned about? The two areas out of 5 that I have spoken about, which RBI is extremely concerned about, is liquidity and financial stability. What is liquidity? Liquidity, simply stated, is having sufficient money in the banking system. And what is financial stability? Financial stability is ensuring that none of the important players in the financial sector are impacted. Now, you have heard about some of the news recently, and I'll talk about it as we go along. So basically, what we have seen so far is that out of various 4 to 5 monetary policy objectives, the biggest concerns for RBI are essentially financial stability and liquidity in the immediate short term, and as we go forward, the growth aspect of the economy. Now, we are all sure that once we are out of the COVID pandemic, the growth will again come back. We have already started seeing news that some of the manufacturing plants have already started functioning, though in the month of April to 20-30% capacity, but in the month of May, the capacity utilization may rise to about 50%. June, it may go up further. And by about July, we'll have the capacity utilization absolutely in place. So economy will come back to normal. At the same time, the small scale sector gets impacted in this period, and therefore we have also heard the RBI suggesting to the banks that there should be a moratorium on the repayment of EMI. So all the EMIs which are due between 1st of March to 31st of May can get postponed to that extent. Now, it is not a waiver, it is just a moratorium, which means that from a cash flow perspective, the payments don't have to happen now. So this is something which the RBI have also done. But at the same time, one of the objectives of RBI also is to kick off growth. Now, simply stated, when interest rates are low, they are generally growth supportive. So kindly keep in mind that by keeping interest rates low, the RBI actually helps growth. Whenever interest rates are risen, the objective is to cool down the economy. Now, all of us know that we are right now not in a situation where we need to cool down. We actually hot up the economy. And in that scenario, bringing down interest rates is also extremely supportive of growth. So as I'm going to narrate to you some of these steps that the Reserve Bank of India has taken, what we are going to now see is essentially it is focused on 3 domains. One is bringing down interest rates to spur growth, to ensure sufficient liquidity in the banking system, and to create financial stability in respect of all the financial sector players. Now, who are the important financial sector players? The most important is the banking system, because all of us know that banking system is the extended arm of RBI in the money creation process. So while RBI prints money, that is the basic form of money, but the layers of money that get created are in the form of bank deposits and the bank's loan programs. And therefore, this cycle continues, and therefore the banking system creates multiple layers of money, and therefore we can say that they are an extended arm of the RBI in the context of money creation, and therefore banks become the immediate layer of the financial sector which needs to be taken care of. But there are many other sectors. The other sectors include the non-banking finance companies. Now, non-banking finance companies are also called as shadow banks because in many ways they do banking functions. They lend money, they also borrow money, but the only thing they are not able to do is they are not able to open savings and current accounts through which they can offer the check issuance facility. That is not allowed to NBFC, but in many other ways, NBFCs are like shadow banks. They are the other layer of banking system. They are not directly in the check issuance, etc. They are not directly involved in the financial transfers like banks are, but nonetheless, they also play a very, very important role. So NBFCs is the next layer. The other layers which are also important are the financial markets. Now, financial markets consist of equity markets, that is share market. They consist of debt markets, that is the borrowings by various companies which are traded. Now, all of us know that term loans are offered by banks to various borrowers. Now, these term loans are contracts between a borrower and a bank. But when that contract is converted into a security form and it is offered for trading in the bond markets, then it takes a form of a security which, like an equity share, can be traded. So that is called as the corporate debt market. In addition, we have commodity markets. We have again foreign exchange markets. So there are extensions of these markets in many, many domains. And financial market stability is also a very important part of RBI's lookout. The other layer, which also becomes very important, is the mutual funds, because mutual funds help individual investors in channelizing their savings through various markets by investing on their behalf, on the behalf of the investors. Now, recently, about 7 8 days ago, we heard a news about one mutual fund making an announcement that they are not going to allow investors to redeem their units, and they will gradually pay the investors over a period of time as they realize the money from various bonds. Now, these bonds are, as I mentioned, are traded in the corporate debt market, but the problem with that particular set of schemes was that they were relatively lower quality bonds. They were not high quality, the AAA rated bonds. They were in the lower categories. And in lower categories, what happens is risk is high, and people invest in those schemes with the attraction of high return, but then high risk and high return. And therefore, the RBI's lookout is also to ensure that stability is maintained in even that sector. So now, friends, with this background, when I now take you through various announcements that RBI has done, you'll be able to appreciate the context in which these announcements have been done. So again, to very briefly summarize the important concerns that RBI had, one is ensuring liquidity, making money available in abundance. And when I say money in abundance, it is not only in the form of currency notes, but also by ensuring that banks have sufficient deposits with RBI. Now, this is another piece that I may just share with you, that many of us may be aware, but some of you, in case you're not aware, whenever we keep deposits with a bank, a certain portion of that is required to be invested by the banks into what is called as the government bonds. These are the bonds which are issued by central and state governments, and so the RBI doesn't allow the entire money to be lent by the banks to various borrowers. As a security, they need to keep a certain percentage in what is called as SLR, statutory liquid ratio. But in addition to that, they are also required to maintain balances with the Reserve Bank of India, what is called as the cash reserve ratio, or CRR. So these are like you and me maintaining bank accounts with a bank. Banks also maintain their balances with RBI, and certain statutory requirements are also there in that context. So ensuring that banks have enough liquidity to maintain all their normal banking operations, plus they should have sufficient money to lend to various potential borrowers, because to kickstart growth, it's important that money is made available to various borrowers. So ensuring liquidity is one of the objectives. Second objective is financial stability, and of course related to that is the growth part. And also one of the objectives is to reduce the interest rates so that it spurs the economy. So with that background, let us now look at what are the monetary policy pronouncements that the Reserve Bank has done. Now, Reserve Bank, all these announcements are not done by the governor using his own prerogative. There is a structure called as Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, which has been put in place a couple of years ago. And this policy is announced by, or rather approved by, the Monetary Policy Committee. So there naturally a lot of deliberations happened towards the end of March, and March 27, with a vote of 4 for and 2 against, they have announced this policy. So what are the important aspects of this policy? One of the important aspects which must be noted by us in the context of interest rates is there was a sizable reduction in what is called as a repo rate. Now I'll explain the concept of repo rate very soon, but before that, let me just talk about to what extent the reduction was done. The reduction in interest rate was done from 5.15%, 5.15% to 4.40%. So it was a drastic reduction of what is called as 75 basis points, which is equal to 0.75%, it was brought down. Now, what is this repo rate? Repo is an abbreviation of repurchase. Again, I'll explain that concept very quickly, but this is the rate at which RBI lends money to banks. So, as you can visualize, when the interest rate was brought down from 5.15% to 4.4%, it becomes easy for banks to borrow money from RBI. It becomes cheaper for banks to borrow money. Now, this is not an unsecured lending. The lending is done against the security of the government bonds that it holds. I have already told you that whenever we keep deposits with banks, banks are required to purchase government bonds roughly to the extent of 20% of a deposit from the bond markets and hold it with themselves. So these set of bonds can be offered as a security to RBI, and against the security of the bonds, the money is lent by RBI. Now, why it is called as repo? And as I said, it's an abbreviation of repurchase. So the transaction is structured in such a way that when the money is being borrowed from RBI, the securities, the government bonds, are sold by banks to Reserve Bank of India at a certain price which is prevailing in the market, and bought back from the Reserve Bank of India at a certain defined price to be paid after 90 days, or now what is being made available for even 3-year window, after 3 years at a predefined price. Now, of course, the market at that time will not be known to anybody today, but the price is pre-agreed in such a way that the price takes care of the interest. So it is a engineered price, it's a calculated price at which the reverse transaction is done, and therefore it is called as repo, repurchase. So RBI is doing purchase of those bonds, and the bank is going to do a repurchase of those bonds 90 days later, or depending on the tenure of that repo, it is going to buy back those bonds at a predefined price. And as I've already narrated, the difference in the price is such that it exactly matches with the calculated interest amount. So RBI has brought down this particular interest rate so that banks find it cheaper to borrow. At the same time, sometimes banks also do the opposite. Banks also lend money to RBI. So when they have surplus liquidity and they don't know what to do with it. By the way, there is also a call money market in which banks are able to lend for very short periods. But sometimes due to market liquidity, sufficient money being available, the rate can drop significantly there also. So then what will the banks do? Because banks are in the business of borrowing money and lending money, and they cannot afford to keep a single rupee idle. So what will they do? They can lend money back to RBI. Now, at what rate is the money lent back to RBI? That is called as the reverse repo rate. So repo rate is the one where bank borrows from RBI. Reverse repo is the one where bank lends to RBI. Now, obviously, the rate at which it is going to lend to RBI is going to be lower than the rate at which it is going to borrow from RBI. It is very obvious. It's exactly like when we keep a deposit with a bank, we get 6% interest. But when we take a housing loan, we have to pay 9%. So it's exactly the same thing. But here, of course, the RBI was paying them a reasonable rate. So what was done there is that just like the repo rate was brought down from 5.15% to 4.40%, the reverse repo rate, which was 4.90%, was brought down to 4%. Now somebody can argue that RBI has acted smart. RBI has reduced the repo rate by a certain percentage, which is 0.75%, but the rate at which they are going to take money from banks, they have brought it down from 4.9 to only 4. Now, the reason for this is that banks are already flush with liquidity. Banks already have a lot of money, and RBI does not want that money to come to RBI. RBI wants that money to go into the market to support borrowers. So therefore, to disincentivize the banks from keeping money, they have reduced the reverse repo rate even more than they have reduced the repo rate. I hope I have been able to make that point clear. And now the reverse repo rate, which was brought down on March 27th, was to only 4% from what was earlier which was 4.9%. Now, one more thing the RBI realized is that, as I've already mentioned, the banks have been flush with liquidity. But even after this reduction, come middle of April, as I'm going to share with you, RBI realized that in spite of the reduction in the reverse repo rate, banks were still putting money with RBI. And that amount even surged from about 3 lakh crores to about 6 lakh crores. And then what is the step that the RBI took? I'm going to come back to the same in a minute. But one more thing that the Reserve Bank also did to ensure that there is sufficient money available and banks are able to give sufficient support to the bond markets or to the securities which are currently traded in the market. So what the Reserve Bank also did was that it offered a 1 lakh crore program through another window of repo, and that window of repo was a 3-year tenure. As I earlier mentioned, typical repos have been for 90 days, short periods. But here RBI offered that the banks could keep RBI's money for as long as 3 years through a repo window. And as I've already mentioned, that's going to be for a long period of time. Now, one more thing that the RBI realized as the time passed by is the flush of liquidity. But to ensure that the banks are not short of money, one more thing they did in March itself is that they reduced the CRR requirement by 1%. It was 4% of the aggregate deposits of the banking system. It was brought down to 3%. Now, can you imagine? We can say that 4% to 3%. So earlier, if the banks were required to keep 4,000 rupees out of your 1 lakh deposit with a bank, now they are allowed to keep, or rather, they are required to keep only 3,000 rupees of deposit with the RBI under the cash reserve ratio window. So now we can say that what is that difference is going to make? Just 1% reduction in the CRR. But friends, that 1% reduction amounts to 1,37,000 crores. Again, I'm repeating, 1% reduction in CRR from 4% to 3% resulted in more money being available with banks to the extent of 1,37,000 crores. Now, this 1,37,000 crores can be lent by banks to the potential borrowers. And as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be growth supportive. In addition, Reserve Bank also can lend money to them under another facility, which is called as Marginal Standing Facility or MSF. Now, there again, there is a certain limit up to which banks are allowed to borrow money. Now, here again, the Reserve Bank of India has increased that limit up to which the banks can borrow, and that is going to support the banks to the extent of another 1,37,000 crores. So, in all, the Reserve Bank of India offered a package which was close to almost 3,70,000 crores. So the government of India, central bank, announced a package of 1,70,000 crores, and the Reserve Bank of India has offered a package. Now, this package is not in terms of spending, but this package is in the form of lending money, and that has been again a staggering amount of 3,70,000 crores. Now, what they also realized over a period that in spite of making this announcement, banks are still keeping money with RBI in larger numbers. Instead of, so having given them the incentive that they should actually start lending money. And of course, some of the corporates may not have also required the money because there is lockdown everywhere. So what started happening was banks started keeping money with the Reserve Bank in increasing numbers. Now, through the reverse repo mechanism, which I have explained earlier. So now, basically, what the Reserve Bank realized that we need to create another disincentive so that banks don't keep money with Reserve Bank, but rather lend money. So how do they create the disincentive? The disincentive which is created is by reducing the reverse repo rate. So obviously think about this. If a bank is offering 7.5% interest rate. Gone are those days, but I'm just saying. Then we have a higher motivation to go and keep the money with the bank. But if the interest rate drops, then we have less motivation to go and keep money with the bank. The same thing RBI has done. What RBI has done on April 17th is they have reduced the rate on the reverse repo rate from 4% to 3.75%. So now if a bank is going to park money with RBI, they're not going to earn 4%, they are going to earn only 3.75%. At the same time, they also created another 50,000 crores of a repo window with which, if need be, particularly with a view to support the MSME sector, with a view to support NBFCs, because I have already told you that NBFCs are called as shadow banks, and with a view to support some of the smaller NBFCs, and even with a view to support the mutual funds. Because now you would also remember I mentioned that there was this problem which happened in the context of mutual funds. So again, on April 27th, the RBI had to again come back and say that if mutual funds have to be supported by banks, now here typically mutual funds take money from various investors and they invest in various securities. But one of the problems that mutual funds can face is that if suppose suddenly they have a redemption pressure, suppose suddenly investors who have invested 1,000 crores worth of money in that mutual fund scheme suddenly come and start withdrawing money, it becomes very difficult for that mutual fund to suddenly go and redeem those bonds or securities in the debt market, because as you must have also read, Indian debt market, Indian share market is very liquid, very fluid, but the Indian debt market doesn't have the amount of depth. What I mean is the deepness which is there in some of the advanced economies. And therefore, if a mutual fund suddenly goes and starts selling a lot of its debt securities, then it may adversely impact the prices, because all of us know that the prices are a result of buying versus selling. If there is a lot of selling pressure, then suddenly the prices will drop, and then it will impact the performance of the mutual fund scheme, and it will impact so many investors. So to avoid that, mutual funds are allowed to borrow to a certain extent, but then they must get the requisite support. So that they get the requisite support, after the episode which I have already narrated to you, in their April 27th meeting, the Reserve Bank of India also announced a certain support for the mutual funds. So mutual funds can be supported by banks, and in turn the banks can take support from RBI to a staggering extent of 50,000 crores. So that is also something which is provided for. There is also a certain amount of support that RBI has given to some of the institutions like NABARD, like SIDBI, which support small organizations, or some of the rural related initiatives. So basically, RBI has also supported them, not only the banks, to ensure that they have sufficient money to on-lend to various institutions. Similarly, they have supported National Housing Bank. So I have tried to give you an overview of how the Reserve Bank of India has tried its best to support financial markets in many ways, by ensuring stability, by ensuring liquidity, by ensuring that there is a spur to growth, by ensuring that the interest rates remain low. The banks are able to borrow from Reserve Bank at a very low rate of interest, and therefore their overall cost of borrowing hopefully will remain low, and they will be able to on-lend at reasonable rates to borrowers. Now, of course, there is also a demand being made, particularly in the non-banking finance sector, that RBI needs to do more. So, of course, that option is always available to RBI, and let us see, depending on how things start shaping up as we are getting out of the lockdown. As things start shaping up, the Reserve Bank will assess the situation and then can do more steps. So I would like to thank all of you for giving me a patience hearing, as well as I would like to thank Advocate Ram Apte again, as well as Advocate Pravartak Pathak to have invited me. And what we could also do now is, in case you have any questions, I would have a look at my chat box, and I would be very happy to take those questions if you have any. I hope that this gave you a good overview. So your feedback, whether this session was useful to you, would also be valued by me, because finally, I always take this customer-centric approach. And for this session, you are my customers, and I need to ensure that I've been able to communicate well in terms of giving you an overview. So your comments, your questions are welcome. So Advocate Shahid Ali, thank you for your compliments. Yes, my pleasure to have helped by giving you a good overview. Thanks, Pravartak, for your feedback. Thank you, Arunaji, for your feedback. Thanks, Santosh. I would also welcome questions if you have any, or if you would like me to explain any of the concepts that I have talked about again, I'll be also happy to do that. So I don't see any questions coming. So I think either I have been explicitly clear, or perhaps I've made that topic very difficult. So it's either of the two, because of which there are no questions. And I hope that I have stuck to the objective which I had discussed with Advocate Apte as well as Advocate Pathak. So I would like to, okay, I think there is a question. Yes, so Advocate Shahid Ali Ansari has a question: how the economy of people can be lifted during these lockdown by providing short-term loans to people? Yes, I think it's a good question, and definitely that is something that through personal loan programs of NBFCs, as well as the banking system, the individuals can be helped. Now, the good thing which has happened is, in spite of all the lockdown, the entire banking system has been functioning. All the payment mechanisms have been working, and we have not seen any kind of disruption. So I think we must thank all of them to have supported. Now, one thing I think I'm taking a clue from Advocate Shahid Ali's question, and I just want to clarify again that one of the ways that the Reserve Bank has helped is by giving the moratorium. So we don't have to repay our EMI for a certain period, and that is helpful. Secondly, the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the MFI, the microfinance institutions, are also in the space of lending money to the people who don't have sufficient resources. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that RBI has also done is to support banks who lend to microfinance institutions. Because again, microfinance institutions are not able to open savings accounts or current accounts like banks are able to do. So they rely on banks to finance them so that they can onward lend to poor people. Now, this is something which is being helped through microfinance institutions, and luckily, the rural areas are not impacted by this pandemic. And the other good thing which has also happened is the rural economy is quite well thriving because of the overall good crop scenario. In the urban spaces, I think all of us are helping in our own way, various NGOs, to ensure that people's livelihoods are taken care of. So I think, I hope I've been able to answer your question in terms of the broad framework which is in operation. The second question is about my view about present recession. Yes, we are going to see a recession. Now, what is the classical definition of recession? It is said that an economy is in recession if for two consecutive quarters it degrows. That means instead of growing, it actually has a negative growth. So, for sure, April to June quarter around the world and even in India, economy is going to shrink. How much is going to shrink? The shrinkage may be between 20% in some economies to 40% in some economies. Now, thankfully, in our country, our central government has been extremely proactive in taking steps, and they have been working in partnership with state governments in ensuring that we do not get into a geometrical spread of the pandemic, like what some of the so-called developed countries have experienced. As we speak, the number of people impacted in the United States has crossed 10 lakhs. The number of people who have died has reached 60,000. So we can just imagine. Now, those economies are going to suffer for a longer period of time. Similarly, economies which are oil producing are going to suffer for a longer period of time. But an economy like us, which is more, intra focused, it is not dependent on the global trade like China is dependent. So to that extent, our recession is going to be a relatively shorter maturity. So I would imagine that by end of June, we should start getting out of this, and therefore the next quarter onwards, we should be again back to the growth trajectory. However, the damage of the first quarter, we have to recover over the following three quarters. So we are the only G20 economy. G20 means the largest 20 economies in the world. We are the only country where the World Bank and IMF have projected that we will have some growth at least for the financial year 2020-21. We are likely to grow by about 1.9%, whereas many of the developed economies may actually degrow during this entire period. So to that extent, my answer is that we are better off as compared to many other economies. There is one question. So there is a question by Pravartak Pathak. Can you also cover the qualitative credit control measures and the bank's response question? I'm not very clear about this question. If you're able to kindly narrate that question again, I'll be very happy to take that question. I must also explain that I'm not a banker, so I may have my own limitations, but within my own limit, I'll be happy to answer to the extent I can. So the question is whether NBFC can give 3 months moratorium for loan as per RBI guidelines. See, essentially, the NBFCs have also been required to give this moratorium because, as I mentioned, that they are shadow banks. So if we only ask banks to give moratorium, but the NBFCs do not give moratorium, then the whole objective will fail. So NBFCs have also given moratorium. But the problem that NBFCs are facing is that they have given moratorium to their own customers, but some of the NBFCs are suffering because banks have not passed on the full moratorium benefit to them. So that is their complaint, and therefore, I mentioned that in my talk that Reserve Bank of India may also be required to consider whether something more needs to be done for the NBFCs themselves, so that they are comfortable in their own finances. So the problem is that if an NBFC gets into a challenge, then the NBFC's securities, which are traded in the bond market, can also get impacted, and in turn, it can impact the mutual funds. So it is a cycle, and therefore, as I've already mentioned, there is a certain package that RBI has already announced in terms of supporting the NBFCs, but there is a clamor that RBI should do more. I think so. I think there is a question of Mr. Ashutosh Amrute, which I'm not able to fully appreciate. I'll read the question. Can you also cover the qualitative credit control measures and the bank's response question is what his, but I'm not able to figure out exactly. Maybe we can take it offline. Advocate Pathak has my number, so I think I would be happy to have a conversation with Advocate Amurthy and Advocate Pathak separately offline. So I think I would like to conclude because I think it's already 50 minutes. So I would like to conclude by thanking all of you for participating by asking questions as well. Really appreciate your participation. Thank you so much. And I'm taking Advocate Pravartak's permission to end this live video. May I request for a response, Advocate Pravartak, so that I can conclude this talk? Okay, let me conclude. Thank you so much.